Are there any constituency statements by honourable members? And I call the member for Curtin.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Think about what the internet could have been. A place where children learn, create and connect safely, where people in crisis find support, where algorithms surface what's true and valuable. Instead, children are being exposed to violent, sexual and misogynistic content. They're forming unhealthy emotional attachments to AI companions designed to maximise engagement. Adults are being radicalised by recommendation systems engineered to serve increasingly extreme content. This is the predictable consequence of design choices made by platforms that seek to maximise engagement and profit. I commend the government for committing to a digital duty of care. This will require digital platforms, including social media sites and AI chatbots, to be safe by design. Digital platforms will have a legal responsibility to prevent harm. But the design of this commitment matters enormously, and I want to flag 3 things that the government must get right. First, there must be a single overarching duty. This would mean platforms had a general obligation to take reasonable steps to prevent foreseeable harm to users, rather than a list of named specific obligations. The difference is significant. A list of specific duties only captures what the drafters anticipated, not new and emerging harms. Specific duties for the highest risk categories can sit underneath an overarching obligation to give industry and regulators clarity, but the overarching duty must not be traded away. Second, the framework must capture the full range of harms. The government's current issues paper sets the threshold at serious harm, but serious harm means loss of life or severe physical injury. And that threshold risks leaving out harms that are less acute or immediate, but still deeply damaging and widespread. This could include the erosion of a child's developmental capacity through unhealthy relationships with AI companions, or the slow degradation of mental health in a teenager who spends years in an algorithmic environment that continues to serve up distressing content. None of these may clearly meet a serious harm threshold, but all of them are deeply problematic, and the government must lower the bar to harm, not serious harm. Third, the E-Safety Commissioner must be properly resourced and empowered. A well-designed duty of care on paper means nothing without a regulator capable of enforcing it. The Commissioner needs powers to compel the production of documents and data from platforms, to audit recommendation algorithms and to litigate appeals. It's great to see that the government has acted on this, passing laws this week to strengthen the Commissioner's powers, but I remain concerned about the Commissioner's budget and her ability to take on the tech giants. So this will also be essential to an effective digital duty of care. Get these 3 things right and a digital duty of care can be genuinely transformative.
Thank the member, and I call the Minister for Defence, Industry and Capability Delivery, Pacific Islands Affairs.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Today I rise to pay tribute to a dear friend, trusted colleague and lifelong Labor activist, Nick Mowbray. Nick's passing has come as a profound shock to so many of us who knew him, worked alongside him and had the privilege of calling him a friend. On behalf of the people of Shortland and the wider Labor family, I extend my deepest condolences to his parents, Gerard Mowbray and Gay Keegan, his sisters Sarah Mowbray and Alex Kenny, his brothers-in-law Michael and Joe, and his much-loved nieces and nephews Bobby, Lila, Florence and Hillary. Nick dedicated much of his life to the causes and values of the Australian Labor Party. His involvement began when he was a student following work experience with the then member for Wallsend, John Mills. He joined the Labor Party as a teenager in 2000 and from that point on remained a committed and active participant in our movement. I first came to know Nick through our work with Greg Combay. From the beginning, he combined sharp political instincts with a genuine commitment to improving people's lives. He understood that politics was not about personalities or titles, it was about delivering outcomes for working people and the communities we represent. When I was elected to Parliament in 2013, Nick joined my office, and for the next 11 years he was my senior advisor, trusted confidant and one of the most capable people I've ever worked with. He helped shape campaigns, policies and speeches. He provided honest and often funny advice, thoughtful counsel and unwavering support. Whether helping a constituent navigate government services, advocating for local projects or developing policy solutions, Nick approached every task with intelligence, empathy and determination. But beyond his professional achievements, Nick's greatest contribution was to the Labor movement itself. He served as Secretary of the Cardiff Elmore Vale branch and as Secretary for both Charlton and Shortend FECs for many years. He represented our region at State Conference for 2 decades and played a role in countless campaigns for Labor candidates, including John Mills, Sonia Hornery, Yasmin Catley, Jodie Harrison, Greg Combay and myself. Nick was always a person who turned up, the first to volunteer and the last to leave. He believed in doing the work and supporting others. Deputy Speaker, there's something difficult about standing in this chamber today. For more than a decade, Nick helped write many of my speeches I've delivered in this parliament. He had a gift of finding the right words and understood the values that should guide everything we do in public life. Today I rise to deliver a speech that Nick did not write. Instead, I rise to speak about him, to thank him for his friendship, his service and his unwavering commitment to our movement and our community. Above all, we remember a loving son, brother, uncle and friend whose kindness touched countless lives. Nick made our movement stronger and our community better. He will be deeply missed. Vale, Nick Mowbray.
I thank the Minister and I call the member for Clark.
Deputy Speaker, last month I met with a group of victim survivors of family and domestic violence from my community, and I'd like to use my time today to read some of their experiences into the parliamentary record. These statements are delivered anonymously, having regard to the privacy and safety of the women, as well as legal matters which are afoot. One statement reads, and I quote, "Imagine being 4 years old, having moved home 8 times, crossed state borders for safety, having survived strangulation before you even took your first breath, witnessing your mother being raped repeatedly, not being protected by a family violence order and living with the ongoing risk that family law orders could require you to spend time with the man responsible for that violence. That is the reality for my son." While governments continue to pledge their commitment to ending family violence and femicide, victim survivors need to see tangible reform. Perpetrators must be held accountable, removed from their victims' lives, and our system must prioritise community safety. Australia can and should do better. It's the end of the quote, Deputy Speaker. Now, Deputy Speaker, I welcome the intent of the government's national plan to end violence against women and children. But intent without meaningful action and adequate resourcing is just a press release. To use the words of one of the women I met, real reforms mean moving beyond ongoing promises and creating systems that genuinely prioritise the safety and well-being of women and children in this country. Deputy Speaker, on average, one woman is killed by a current or former partner every week. One a week, and that is obviously completely and utterly unacceptable. Clearly, the systems we have in place are not working because, at best, they do little to protect vulnerable women and children, and at worst, send them right back into the arms of their abusers. As one of the women said to me, a lot of the process is the punishment. Deputy Speaker, the abuse of institutions is a big part of the problem. Abuse of the courts, vexatious claims made against victim survivors, and lies told to government agencies like the ATO and Centrelink are some of the accounts given to me. Frankly, it's a damning indictment of our system that the process designed to protect victim survivors are being turned into a weapon against them. In fact, several of the women I met with detailed how they now have criminal records because of the lies told in court by abusers. So, Deputy Speaker, the national plan is good, but it's time for some national action to address this crisis. These women and children need leadership from governments, and they desperately need it now. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member for Clark. I call the Assistant Minister for Defence.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. 10 years ago today, I had the great privilege of being elected as a member of Wills. And in my first speech, I said that I was elected by the people of Wills to serve them and to make a difference in their lives. That sounds simple, but it is a really important commitment and promise. And what I've learnt over those years is that in doing so, it wasn't just a one-way effort. I was doing it with them. We did it together. We actually worked together to deliver real improvements for the community, and that's been the most satisfying part of being a member representing my community. We've secured a Medicare urgent care clinic in Coburg and in Carlton as well, which is also in my electorate now. And we've backed local arts, schools, sports clubs and community organisations through all of the different federal government investment and grants and election commitments, which have been so critically important for those communities. In the environment, we've revitalised sections of Moonee Ponds Creek, which is the border of my electorate. It was once a concrete canal. It was all concreted up. We've returned that to nature. We've removed the concrete and we've done so much to open that up for the local community to enjoy the natural flora and fauna of that part of the world, that urban waterway. I've put in 2 solar community batteries into my electorate. We've funded an arts place called Ballinballen Place, which is an amazing place in Brunswick that includes an Indigenous art gallery, performance space for artists, and it's just wonderful to visit. And nationally, I think it's important to note that we've delivered multiple tax cuts, more bulk billing, 5% deposits for people's first home, expanded parental leave and early education, free TAFE, 20% off HECS, and so much more. But most importantly, Deputy Speaker, my office and I have really put first and foremost service to the community as our objective. We've assisted constituents to access Centrelink or any issues with it, with the NDIS, aged care, and through other government services, and helping them navigate what is often a very difficult process, especially if they're vulnerable and unable to do so of their own volition. The thing that I'm very proud about as well, Deputy Speaker, is, and it's very rewarding but difficult work, is over these past 10 years, is helping hundreds of refugees and migrants secure visas and begin their new lives in Australia and make their contribution. It's one of the great privileges of my time in this place. In my first speech, I warned that we must beware of the demagogues and charlatans who take advantage of the disaffected and angry in our society and direct that anger towards minorities and refugees to stir up their own political ends. And sadly, that warning still pertains today. It's as relevant today as it was then. Deputy Speaker, I will continue to stand up for the people who are vulnerable in my community, but also it's been a great privilege serving in this parliament and serving my community.
I thank the Assistant Minister. I call the member for Curtin.
I rise to present a petition signed by more than 13,000 Australians. The petition has been considered by the Petitions Committee and found to be in order. It calls on this House to amend the Criminal Code Act so that it no longer applies to voluntary assisted dying, or VAD. 13,000 people have delivered a simple message to the government. A dying person should not suffer because of an anomaly in Commonwealth law. The problem isn't complicated. VAD is now an established part of Australia's health system. Every state and the ACT have legislated for it with strict safeguards. The Northern Territory may follow this year. Yet a provision in the Commonwealth Criminal Code, written in 2005, 12 years before any VAD law existed and aimed at pro-suicide websites, criminalises the use of telecommunications for VAD. A doctor who uses the phone, internet, fax, email or video conferencing to provide lawful VAD care risks prosecution and fines greater than $300,000. This means seriously ill patients must attend every consultation in person, travelling long distances while gravely unwell, often more than once, to make and confirm their request. This particularly affects Australians in rural and remote areas. This petition was brought to the House by Emma Hargreaves on behalf of her father Terry. In his final weeks, just reaching the bathroom was a huge task, let alone getting into a car for a medical appointment. This outdated Commonwealth Code provision meant telehealth was not an option for Terry. It should have been. Emma said it would have made an enormous difference and empowered her dad in his final moments. Terry deserved a better death. VAD is lawful in every state, yet dying people like Terry cannot properly access it. Australia is the only country in the world that prohibits telehealth for voluntary assisted dying. The solution is simple and it's ready. I introduced a private member's bill in 2024 and relisted it on the notice paper this year to amend the criminal code so it no longer applies to accessing VAD through telehealth in line with state and territory law. The Attorney-General has described this as a complex issue. With respect, it really is not. All states and the ACT have done their part. Every one of them has legislated with safeguards. The only barrier that remains is a single provision of the Commonwealth Code. So the problem is one of will, not complexity. The AMA, the Law Council, VAD regulatory bodies, 20 health organisations and state attorneys general and health ministers all support this change. Refusing to fix this is a choice, leaving Australians like Terry to suffer needlessly. I commend this petition to the House.
Has the petition been approved by the Petitions Committee?
Yes, it has.
I thank the member for Curtin, and that will be handed to the attendant. And I call the member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, it's finally open. After years of planning, investment and construction, Geelong's Nail Banyul Convention and Event Centre is now welcoming visitors. And while it's on Geelong's waterfront, the benefits won't stop there. Every conference or major event will bring people looking for somewhere to stay, somewhere to eat and somewhere to explore. Whether it's a tourism showcase, a technology summit or a manufacturing expo, the Convention Centre is a dynamic piece in the puzzle that will put the wider Geelong region on the map. That means more visitors discovering the Bellarine wineries, restaurants and pubs, more people extending their stay on the Surf Coast, and more customers for local cafes, retailers and tourism operators from Torquay to Ocean Grove, from Barwon Heads to Port Arlington, right here in my electorate of Corangamite. That's what makes this project so important. It's an investment that strengthens Geelong as the gateway to everything my part of Victoria has to offer. And it's already delivered 1,400 jobs, with more to come. Deputy Speaker, it builds on the work we're doing across the Bellarine and Surf Coast to support growing communities. We will soon open a headspace and a forecourt sports stadium in Armstrong Creek, aquatic facilities in Torquay and Drysdale, and new and upgraded sporting facilities in Ocean Grove and Grovedale. At Leopold Memorial Reserve, we've just delivered a major $3.5 million upgrade for local sports clubs and community groups. It means change rooms that meet the needs of both men and women sporting teams, more parking, better lights, a new scoreboard and so much more. We're also delivering stage 2 of the Barwon Heads Road upgrade, improving safety and connectivity for one of the fastest growing parts of Victoria. These projects work together. Better roads connect communities, better sporting facilities bring people together, and a world-class convention centre brings more visitors who will experience everything the Bellarine and Surf Coast have to offer. That's good for local business, it's good for local jobs, and it's another example of what can happen when governments invest in a long-term future. I'm proud to be part of a government that's backing this part of Victoria, creating opportunity today while building confidence for the future. Thank you.
I thank the member for Corangamite, and I call the member for Nichols.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As at the last election, the AEC boundary changes meant that the town of Kilmore came into the electorate that I represent, the electorate of Nichols. And Kilmore is one of the oldest inland towns in Australia. It's a beautiful place that has bluestone buildings, a historic jail and a monument to human hovel. But it's also one of the fastest growing regional communities in Victoria, and population growth across the Mitchell Shire is placing enormous pressure on roads that were never designed to carry today's traffic volumes. Residents, businesses, freight operators and visitors are all experiencing increased congestion, delays and safety concerns. So heavy vehicles are continuing to travel through the centre of Kilmore, creating safety risks for pedestrians, shoppers and local businesses. Local roads are carrying not only local traffic, but also growing commuter and freight movements. And congestion reduces productivity, worsens amenity and undermines the livability of the town. And the Kilmore Structure Plan identifies Highgate Road as a key strategic road project needed to support the town's continued growth. And without appropriate link roads, traffic from new estates is forced to add to the congestion to get to the commercial precinct. And the Mitchell Shire Council has already allocated funding for planning and design works for a future road connection between Kings Lane and John Street. And the link roads are a critical first step for Kilmore, but it needs government attention. The Mitchell Shire Council has identified the Kilmore bypass as one of the highest advocacy priorities, but the project has been languishing for years. The bypass is essential to improve safety, reduce congestion and return the historic town centre to local residents and businesses. The bypass would remove significant volumes of heavy traffic from Sydney Street and the town centre. The historic buildings, part of Kilmore's enduring charm, were built for horse and cart, not the heavy transport now rumbling through the town. Better roads support local businesses by improving access to shops, services and industrial areas. The improved freight routes strengthen regional supply chains and help local producers get goods to markets efficiently. And safer roads mean fewer accidents and a better quality of life for local residents. Deputy Speaker, Kilmore cannot continue to grow with yesterday's road network. The community needs a coordinated package of infrastructure investment that includes important link roads and the Kilmore bypass. It honestly has been ignored by too many governments for too long, and state and federal governments need to focus on Kilmore, focus on the population growth, look at the infrastructure that needs to be developed and built, and get on with the job. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member and I call the member for Bonner.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In my electorate of Bonner, Labor's cheaper medicine policy has delivered 2.7 million cheaper scripts, putting more than $19 million back in the pockets of locals. And from 1 July, people in my community and of course right across the country have gained access to 10 new and expanded PBS listings, making more life-changing medicines affordable for everyday Aussies. Tezspire is now listed for severe uncontrolled asthma, with around 18,500 Australians expected to benefit from access to treatment that could otherwise cost up to $1,600 per injection. Neffy will provide a new needle-free option for children and adults at risk of anaphylaxis, with around 150,000 Australians currently accessing comparable treatments. Traceba is now listed for people living with type 1 diabetes, benefiting around 14,000 Australians while reducing costs by up to $500 per pack. Raystigo is now listed for adults living with generalised myasthenia gravis, with almost 5,000 Australians expected to benefit from treatment that otherwise costs up to $10,000 per pack. Expanded access to Alcina, which will benefit around 440 Australians with certain types of lung cancer, avoiding treatment costs of around $188,000 per course of treatment. And expanded access to Perjuta, which will help more than 3,000 Aussies with HER2 positive early breast cancer receive the treatment that they need. Deputy Speaker, Labor is strengthening Medicare and making sure Australians can get the medicines that they need at just $25 for their scripts or $7.70 with a concession card. That is Labor making a real difference to everyday Aussies. Deputy Speaker, building Australia's future also means backing the small businesses that keep our communities and local economies strong. Bonner is home to more than 14,000 small businesses, and that's why the Albanese Labor government continues to fund the Small Business Debt Helpline, providing free, independent and confidential support to small business owners and sole traders experiencing financial difficulty. Whether someone doesn't know where to start with their business debt, needs more help in negotiations with the ATO, or is considering the future of their business, the helpline provides practical expert advice. Importantly, it also supports victims, survivors of domestic and family violence who have been left with business debts experienced through financial abuse. If you're a small business owner doing it tough, you don't have to face it alone. Help is available, and that is here. We are here to deliver.
I thank the member and call the member for Barara.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I want to acknowledge the passing of a great Australian, Isaac Wakell AO, aged 104. Isaac's story is the great Australian story. A person born overseas, fleeing persecution, making his fortune and giving back in spades to the country he loved. Isaac Wakell was born in Baghdad in 1922. He was the survivor of the 1941 Farhud pogrom against Iraqi Jews. He came to Australia in 1949 and became a successful entrepreneur in the clothing industry. It was while working in fashion that he met his beloved wife Susan, who he married in 1953. He was besotted and absolutely devoted to her. They were married for 65 years until Susan's death in 2018. And after her death, her life became the inspiration for the good works and opportunities he created for others. In business, they were extremely successful. Susan and Isaac worked hard, they invested wisely in property and became lifelong supporters of the arts, particularly Opera Australia and the Art Gallery of New South Wales. In the 70s and 80s, they were one of Sydney's glamour couples. I first met Susan and Isaac in 2017. They'd taken an interest in my career and they were generous hosts and bon vivants. It was 10 o'clock in the morning, but Isaac said, "Julian, you've come over, we must have champagne." As Susan's health declined, they retreated from society. A decade ago, they began liquidating their property holdings and established one of the most significant charitable foundations in Australia's history. Through the Susan and Isaac Wakell Foundation, they touched tens of thousands of lives, supporting patients, students, artists, Aboriginal people and young people experiencing opera for the first time. When I sat on the Council of the National Library, I approached Isaac about supporting the digitisation of performing arts materials, including Opera Australian productions that the Wakells had originally supported. He gave $1 million to make these materials accessible to all Australians. They made a $24 million gift to the Art Gallery of New South Wales, the largest monetary gift in the gallery's history. They gave $35 million to Sydney University to establish a purpose-built health sciences facility that now bears Susan's name. As Isaac said when the gift was announced, Australia is a good country. Australia's a great country. It's a good feeling to give something back. As a proud member of the Jewish community, Isaac was very disappointed by the anti-Semitism that was allowed to run rife at Sydney University, and he made his feelings known to Vice-Chancellor Mark Scott and called him to take stronger action. Susan and Isaac supported the incredible work of the Sydney Jewish Museum's education programs and the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies. He was also a great supporter of the Liberal Party and especially supported and admired the leadership of Scott Morrison. Both Susan and Isaac were appointed officers of the Order of Australia in 2017. This is a sad time for the Wakell, Kadoorie and Lippman families. It was my privilege to know a wise, generous, kind man who took an interest in the lives of others, a Jewish Australian patriot who wanted to create opportunities for others and whose generosity was inspired by his abiding love for his wife. Isaac is now reunited with his beloved Susan. May his memory be a blessing.
I thank the member. I call the member for Griffith.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This year's King's Birthday Honours recognised 14 Griffith recipients whose service reflects the best of our community. And in my short few minutes here today, I want to acknowledge a few of them. Matthew Ames received his honour for significant service to community health, engineering, business administration and corporate governance. A Metro South Health Board member since 2022, Matthew brings more than 20 years' experience in environmental health and safety, risk management and governance. He has also been a strong consumer advocate across Queensland Health, helping ensure patients and families have a voice in the systems that affect their lives. Matthew has given years of service to Hear and Say, supporting better outcomes for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. He has also been a leader in sepsis advocacy, helping improve awareness, care and recovery for people affected by sepsis. Professor Hans Peter Sawyer, AO, received his honour for distinguished service in dermatology, skin cancer diagnosis, medical research and governance. As Director of the Dermatology Research Centre at the University of Queensland's Fraser Institute and through his work at the Princess Alexandra Hospital, Professor Sawyer has helped advance the early detection and treatment of melanoma and other skin cancers. Professor Sawyer's work has been vital in Queensland, where skin cancer affects too many families as the melanoma capital of the world. Professor Sawyer's research brings together clinical care, new technology and collaboration, including 3D total body imaging and the use of artificial intelligence in dermatology. His work aims to find skin cancers earlier, improve patient outcomes and address gaps in access to care, especially in regional and rural and remote Australia. Katarina Carroll, AO, APM, received her honour for distinguished service to law enforcement, disaster management and the community. As Queensland Police Commissioner, former Commissioner of Queensland Fire and Emergency Services and a leader through floods, cyclones and major public safety operations, Katarina has served Queensland with strength and calm. Christine Carsley, OAM, received the Medal for the Order of Australia for service to the multicultural community and public administration. As CEO of Multicultural Australia, she helps support refugees, migrants and new Australians to find safety, belonging and opportunity. Christine also contributed to the Task Force on Domestic and Family Violence, which delivered the landmark Not Now, Not Ever report. She now serves on the board of DV Connect, continuing to work to support people experiencing violence and abuse. I also acknowledge the other Griffith recipients named in this year's honours. Associate Professor Alan Gale, OAM, was recognised for service to cardiothoracic surgery and the community. Craig Holden, OAM, and Craig Williams, OAM, have given decades of service in surf lifesaving. Mark Neve, OAM, was recognised for service to youth. Kathleen Noonan, OAM, was named for service to social welfare. There are so many more of these outstanding leaders across my community, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of my community, I congratulate each of them and I thank them sincerely for their service to our wonderful community of Griffith, to Queensland and, of course, to Australia.
I thank the member. I call the member for Casey.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, CFA volunteers give back so much to our community, and today I want to pay tribute to a good friend of mine, someone that I've known for 20 years, Tim Mitchelson, better known to all of us as Loaf. He's stepping back from the BMT at the Wandon Fire Brigade, but he has served our community with distinction. He was 4th Lieutenant from 2009 to 2016. He was Captain from 2016 to 2022. He's the 1st Lieutenant from 2022 until today. Loaf, thank you for your service. You have given so much to so many, keeping the community in Wandon safe, the wider Yarra Valley, all of Victoria and the country when called on. We appreciate your service. I know you're going to continue to give more to the Wandon community, continuing to work and be a volunteer for the CFA. Thank you, mate. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you again. The Casey community is lucky to have the best wine region in the world, the Yarra Valley, in my community. It provides jobs, it provides opportunity, it brings tourism to our community, and we always deliver quality wines. And I want to pay tribute to some of the winners of so many awards. At the National Wine Show of Australia Awards, Coldstream Hills had Chief Winemaker Andrew Fleming win, winemaker Greg Jarrett be successful for the Sparkling Trophy, the 2018 Yarra Valley Pinot Noir Chardonnay. I want to pay tribute to De Bortley, the Managing Director Darren De Bortley, the Yarra Valley Estate Manager Leanne De Bortley, the Red Varietal Trophy, 2025, the Yarra Valley Estate Vineyard Gamay. And Giant Steps General Manager Melanie Chester, the Pinot Noir Trophy for 2024, the Sexton Vineyard Pinot Noir, and they're also finalists in the Chardonnay and James Halliday red wine categories. Desuma, congratulations on being a finalist for Sparkling. Yarra Yering, congratulations on being a finalist for the Cabernet Blends. And the Real Review 2026 Top Wineries of Australia. Yarra Yering, Australia's top winery for the 3rd year in a row. Levantine Hill, also in the Yarra Valley, came 2nd. At the Victorian Wine Show, Oak Ridge Wines, Best Wine of the Yarra Valley, Victoria's Premier Trophy. Also for their 2023 864 Thunder and Diamond Drive Block Chardonnay. And the 2027 Halliday Wine Companion Shortlist, winners to be announced in August. Oak Ridge Wines and Yeringberg, congratulations. Winemaker of the Year, Rowan Smith from Medhurst Wines. Viticulturist of the Year, Andrew George, Yarra Yering. And the Best Value Winery, Medhurst Wines. Not only amazing wineries, thank you for everything you give, but gins as well. 4 Pillars Distillery. I want to pay tribute to head distiller Sarah Prowse, who is the 2026 ADA Australian Distiller of the Year, following in the footsteps of Cam McKenzie, the founder and first distiller. Well done, Sarah, well deserved.
I thank the member. I call the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to give a special shout out to Oscar One CFA. This Oscar One CFA is quite a unique CFA volunteer unit in Bendigo. Its focus is on mine rescue. Like many old mining regions, Bendigo is littered with empty mine shafts. Start to renovate, one may open up. Out in the Whipstick Forest or many of our other forests, they are everywhere and quite often weren't filled in properly. So there is a need for a unit like Oscar One. They are made up of volunteers, many of whom work in the mining industry currently or are volunteers of other CFA brigades that come together on a Wednesday to make sure that they are best at their specialty, mine rescue. As I said, they are unique and quite often can fall through the cracks of the very large organisation that is known as the CFA. But in my meeting with them, I was impressed by their dedication to what they do. They get together, they train, they work in a really collaborative way. So collaborative that they actually took out first place in the Victorian Mine Rescue Competition hosted earlier this year by the MCA Vic branch at La Trobe University. Volunteers beating local companies across Victoria and New South Wales for their specialist approach and skills. Congratulations, Oscar 1, and thank you for what you do, for making sure that all of us are safe when it comes to our local community, local environment, and in the unfortunate situation if any of us or pets were to fall down a disused mine shaft. Deputy Speaker, I would also like to pay tribute and honour the late Don Drummond. Don and I first met many, many years ago before I was the federal member for Bendigo, back when Woodend was in the Bendigo electorate. Don passed away recently, and even though Woodend hasn't been in Bendigo for a long time, he has kept in touch. Don would always remind me of the time when he stood for Ballarat, back in the dark days of Labor. He was one of those warriors, those true believers, who would put on the shirt, fly the flag, even when we knew it was impossible. Don and his late wife Sheila were known throughout Bendigo for their passion for the arts, in particular literature. They had a well-established career in publishing. Don will be missed. Before it was a thing in Labor, he always started branch meetings with a welcome to country and a values statement, the commitment to the burning light, as he said. Someone of great intellect and always a great ear. He was someone who was a true believer. Valet Don, you will be missed.
I thank the member. I call the member for Fadden.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I rise today with a heavy heart because the scourge of domestic and family violence is no longer just a headline in the media for our local community. This week it's been happening in our own backyard. In bigger waters, 23-year-old Mallory Jane Roberts, a young mum with a little son, was allegedly shot and killed in her own home. Police have charged her partner with domestic violence, murder and a weapons offence and have alleged a homemade unregistered firearm was used. Mallory is the 34th Australian woman to fall victim and be killed as a result of domestic violence this year. But it's more than just the 34 as a number. Someone like Mallory will be remembered by those who loved her as having a beautiful heart and a kind spirit, a daughter, a mother, a sister, a friend and a child who now grows up without his mum. I also want to acknowledge the courage of neighbour Sharon Burgess, who did what every decent Australian hopes they would. She called 000 and desperately tried to save Mallory's life until paramedics arrived, but sadly Mallory could not be saved. And then in Hope Island, just a couple of nights ago, another horror unfolded. A 38-year-old man locked himself in a room in the home of his former partner and set the house on fire, killing himself and seriously injuring other occupants. These are no longer distant tragedies. Bigger Waters and Hope Island are suburbs in our community, streets our families know and suburbs where we live. To the families grieving this week, our community grieves with you. To anyone living in fear, please know this: you are not alone. You deserve help, safety and support. And to all of us in this place, we must be clear. Domestic and family violence must be called out, wherever it occurs, backed by our brave police, frontline services, neighbours, families and a community that refuses to look away. We must work together to end domestic and family violence. Deputy Speaker, twice this week the Prime Minister was asked if he could guarantee house prices won't tank, but he refused to answer. Then, of course, the hapless Housing Minister was asked the same question all week in question time, and she refused to answer too. So Australians really deserve to know what is it that they're hiding. There's a big difference between making housing more affordable and crashing the value of homes of everyday Australians who've worked their lives to own that bit of Australia. Now, the Housing Minister has talked about a 10 to 20% correction. Now, that should concern every Australian with a mortgage. It's not a housing plan, that's an admission that this government has lost control. The dream has turned into a nightmare under this Labor government. We know that the Minister was hopeless in home affairs and now she's hopeless with homes.
I thank the member and I call the member for Gordon.
Deputy Speaker, I rise today to raise the voices of community concerns in the Outer West. In my community in the Melbourne's western suburbs, there's been a proposal for the largest data centre ever publicly proposed in Australia. At 350 hectares, the Plumpton Data Centre project will cover the equivalent of 175 MCG playing fields. People in our community are rightly asking questions about what a development of this scale could mean for our growing suburbs. I want to take this opportunity in this parliamentary chamber to say I hear the concerns about the potential impact on local energy and water resources, increased traffic movements, noise, and the cumulative pressure placed on infrastructure that is already struggling to keep pace. These are the right questions to be asking. They reflect a community who want to understand how a major industrial development would affect their quality of life, local environment, and future of our region. As AI demand and reliance on cloud computing grows, data centre investment in Australia is necessary. But in our community, near homes and close to schools as well, data centre development must happen in ways that deliver positive outcomes for the community. The Albanese Labor government has set out clear expectations for data centres and AI infrastructure built here to ensure investments provide tangible benefits for both locally and across Australia. Operators must prioritise Australia's national interest, not only by strengthening our security and resilience, but also by delivering the benefits to local communities. They are also expected to support the energy transition with new renewable energy and not put upward pressure on energy prices, manage water responsibly, create well-paid jobs and local skills, and back startups, research, innovations and supply chain. I will not support data centre developments that fail to meet these expectations. Our community deserves clear answers, genuine consultation and transparent planning processes. The West cannot simply become the destination for infrastructure that places additional strain on resources while delivering little in return. I will continue to listen to residents, seek answers on their behalf and advocate strongly for the long-term visibility, sustainability and well-being of our growing community.
I thank the member. I call the member for Parks.
The other side of the world know what we're thinking almost before we've thought it. But sadly, it has become harder and harder to send a simple letter, Deputy Speaker. We have many people in my electorate who prefer to do their banking face-to-face, to post parcels and letters to their loved ones and to pay bills face-to-face rather than online. But the services of Australia Post are not only costing more, they're becoming fewer and fewer. These services, some of the very few available to quite a number of my communities, are being whittled away. I have had phone calls from no fewer than 6 licensed post offices across the Parks electorate to speak up against the slow undermining of regional post offices. Between them, these people have served their communities for decades. They have listened to the life stories, held elderly people with their complicated paperwork, have been the only break in the day for busy farmers, signed important papers as Justice of the Peace and assisted people to pay their bills. As one licensee said, this is not just a commercial concern. When a small community loses its post office, it loses much, much more than a place to send parcels. It loses its last point of banking, government services, JP functions and human contact with essential services. These networks that exist today took generations to build and cannot easily be replaced. Another licensee said, the post office is not one option of many. It is the infrastructure that holds communities together. If these services go, people in communities like Whitecliffs, Condobolin, Peak Hill, Bogan Gate, Yamundry will be forced to drive 60 minutes.
If the member could just pause. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division, and the proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed after this division or subsequent divisions. And the member in continuation.
Parliamentary will be forced to drive 60 minutes, 80 minutes, 2 hours or up to 6 hours to the nearest town with a post office. Regional people once again are treated like second-class citizens. People are paying more and more, but less and less is being delivered. I look forward to the spotlight being shone on Australia Post at the Senate inquiry that will look at this government-owned business's leaked plans to close up to 36 metropolitan post offices and change the licensing agreements to regional and rural post offices. The leaked business case, Post Office Network and Licensed Post Office Reimagined, dated June this year, envisages widespread changes to regional and rural post offices that could see them become nothing more than a parcel locker. Deputy Speaker, I know that's the same for my colleagues in the room, member for Dawson and the member for Cowper as well. It's happening right across regional Australia. And Deputy Speaker, enough is enough. Australia Post needs to take note. Regional people need essential services too.
I thank the member. I call the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And of course, July 1 was yesterday, and this was a really important day where there was a lot of cost of living help provided by this government. Of course, starting from the 1st of July, I'm really very pleased that workers that rely on the national minimum wage, but also national minimum award wages, will have seen a boost to their wages. Modern award wages have increased by 4.75% and the national minimum wage has gone up 6%. This is really important for our lowest paid workers in this country. And of course, our government strongly advocated for these increases because we believe that workers deserve to be paid fairly and wages need to keep on moving. And I wanted to share workers like Brandon are one of those examples of people that are benefiting, who contacted my office to let me know that this will make a huge difference to him and other young people in the retail workspace, who now feel they can get ahead and start saving from a home. Of course, there were also tax cuts coming in on the 1st of July. The Albanese Labor government is making sure that more workers right around the country, but particularly I have so many hard-working people in the southern suburbs of Adelaide, and they are getting a tax cut or have got a tax cut on the 1st of July. Of course, this is in addition to the tax cuts our government has already delivered, but also there are more tax cuts coming. Of course, there is a new $1,000 instant tax deduction that was in the budget, along with a $250 working Australian tax offset coming next year. We are absolutely committed as a government to continue to ensure that workers are getting tax cuts over and over again to support them with cost of living. Of course, the Labor Party is the party of superannuation. We firmly believe that superannuation enables people to save for their retirement and is a really important reform brought in by Labor government. And of course, this Labor government has continued this legacy by ensuring that we reach 12% in the contributions made, but also importantly, from the 1st of July, we have now introduced payday super. This is a really important reform that strengthens and ensures that we treat superannuation with the same importance that we treat someone's pay packet, making sure that they get paid on time and making sure that workers get what they are entitled to and what they've earned. Of course, finally, I say paid parental leave, 6 months. This is a really exciting thing that started from the 1st of July, that parents of newborns can now have 6 months of paid parental leave.
I thank the Minister. I call the member for Groom.
Thank you, Speaker. Every parent wants better for their kids. That's why we turn up to work, that's why we save, we drive them to piano lessons, take them to kids' sport and put the effort in to our kids' lives because we want better for them. And one of the great things about Toowoomba, we have these great schools, great hospitals, people come to our region, but it's the opportunity that's provided in a region like mine that drives people. But the more I talk to my constituents, particularly in these times, I'm finding that parents are losing that optimism. And look, watching the changes that are taking place in the world around us, Speaker, I can't blame them. You know, we turn on the news, we hear of geopolitical changes, the world moving from rules-based order back to spheres of influence. We see populist instability right across the world and the challenges to stable government that it presents. I talk to young kids about the impact of social media, what they see on a regular basis, what my kids see on a regular basis and how that impacts them. And we hear the challenges of social cohesion right here in Australia, let alone what's happening around the world, right here in Australia. Things that we never thought we'd see, Australians pitching themselves against Australians. And I think that drags down on that sense of optimism that we've all carried. The reason we do the hard work we do, because that future somehow looks that little bit less bright. Speaker, there was a time in this place where politics was a bit more left-right. And I don't blame that, because the thrust of the conversation was good jobs and good pay and finding the balance between those who wanted to invest and those who wanted to invest their labour. And between that, finding that balance and saying, right, I want you to have your job, I want to protect your job, but I want to make sure that business is thriving so that your jobs are encouraged and our nation can grow and prosper. And Speaker, that was a good conversation to be having. Today we find ourselves questioning the very value of our institutions. I can't believe we're doing this. We're questioning the value of consensus between parties. We're seeing a my way or the highway approach to politics. And we're questioning political gradualism versus urges for revolution in the political sphere. And I think these are terribly challenging things when we consider that. But part of the solution to dealing with these issues, about making that future brighter, is, I think, positioning our policy around our kids' future and reminding ourselves of the hard work that not just parents do, but governments must do to prepare that future, that better future. Speaker, the appeal of chaos diminishes the longer into the future it's going to have to be in place. And I think that's part of the political debate that we have to have here. That left-right debate is a good debate when it speaks to stability, when it speaks to balance, when it speaks to finding the best way for Australians to have good jobs and good pay, for our communities to be protected, for their jobs to be protected. I think this is the conversation that we should be having.
I thank the member. I call the member for Petrie.
Deputy Speaker, today I want to celebrate 3 examples of what makes Petrie such a special place: creativity, community and confidence in the future. First, Redcliffe is fast making its case as the art capital of the world. Across the peninsula, creativity is everywhere. We see it in our galleries, our community groups, schools, and in the people who give their time and talent to make our community brighter. The Redcliffe Floral and Art Show is a beautiful example of that spirit. It brings together colour, care, creativity, and community pride. It reminds us that art is not distant or exclusive. It belongs in our neighbourhoods, community halls, and in the hands of people who love creating something beautiful. It's been organised by the fantastic Liz Peters, and this event has gone from strength to strength. I also want to acknowledge the Redcliffe Art Society and its exhibition of excellence. For decades, the Society has supported local artists, encouraged new talent, and helped make Redcliffe a genuine cultural hub. To every artist, organiser, volunteer and supporter involved, thank you for adding so much life and colour to our community. Deputy Speaker, the second thing I want to celebrate is bringing Parliament to Petrie. Recently, at Brackenridge State School, I hosted Politics in Schools program with the Speaker of the House. It was an opportunity for students to learn about democracy, representation and how decisions are made here in this building. Not every young person gets a chance to travel to Canberra, so programs like this matter. They show students that Parliament belongs to them too. They help young people understand that their voices count and their ideas and democracy is strongest when people are informed and engaged. I thank the staff and students and the school community at Brackenridge State School, including the Principal Robin Harris, Deputy Principal Ben Laws and the Head of Curriculum Jess Edwards for their warm welcome and embracing this opportunity. And finally, Deputy Speaker, I recognise a historic moment in our region, the groundbreaking of PsiQuantum's world-first, utility-scale, fault-tolerant quantum computer. This is not just a major scientific milestone, it is a statement about Australia's future. It says world-leading technology, advanced manufacturing and the jobs of tomorrow can be built right here in our region. Quantum computing has the potential to transform industries like medicine, energy, agriculture, logistics, material science and more we can't even fathom today. For our community, it means new opportunities, new skills, and a place at the centre of this exciting technology. From local artists in Redcliffe to students learning about democracy in Brackenridge to world-leading quantum technology being built right in our region, Petrie is a place of talent, ambition and possibility. I'm incredibly proud to represent this community.
I thank the member for Petrie. I call the member for Cowper.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Yesterday we heard Labor spruiking their changes that came into effect with the new financial year, and there was a lot of chest beating and oversimplified statements around the standards of living that would make anyone not living in the real world think that things have never been better. But the average Australian knows that's not true, and they're feeling the pressure of household budgets, breaking point, and at the same time their salary is not buying what it used to when Labor came in. And it's simply Labor's divert, deflect and deny talking points. So I've taken the liberty to change the script, and it sounds a little bit like this. As of today, we've hit new heights when it comes to the cost of living pressures, with increases in prices over the past 4 years that this country has never seen before. Insurance is up 42%, household electricity bills up 38%, gas up 37%, rent's up and your weekly food shop is up 17%. Oh, and for those young Aussies with a mortgage, you've seen 15 interest rate rises since Labor came to power, and as a direct result of inflationary policies.
Could pause. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division and subsequent divisions.
The member for Cowper in continuation.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. And before I was interrupted, I was reading from the new Labor talking points, and it goes on to say, and for Aussies with a mortgage, you've seen 15 interest rate rises since we came to power as a direct result of our inflationary policies. So on average, you're spending another $29,000 on your mortgage. And as a result of our May announcements, your house is now worth 10% less. Congratulations. And small business, we haven't forgotten you. We know that your input costs are already through the roof and your profit margins are even slimmer. We know that the number of annual insolvencies has tripled this financial year when compared with 2022. But we're going to kick the boot in a little further and raise your labour costs by increasing the minimum wage, which sounds good on paper but actually means business owners will be forced to reduce their staffing numbers and unemployment is set to rise. Oh, and if you're thinking about selling your business, we'll take an increased chunk of that too. But it's okay, everyone. Labor's groundbreaking income tax cut will put $4.80 back in your pocket to cover it. A tiny cut doesn't release the pressure created from failed policies and failed ideology over prosperity, Deputy Speaker. And even if they don't realise it consciously, Australians are feeling it every single day. The Coalition remains committed to reversing the decisions that have led to the biggest hit to Australian living standards this century. We will get back to basics with a sensible tax system that reward the aspirations and productivity. We will put in place an energy policy that ensures affordability over ideology. We will support small businesses and family households, and we will put Australians first.
The member for Newcastle.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I rise today to honour the life and service of Julia Morris and to extend my deepest condolences to her daughter Molly, her parents Alan and Anne, her brother James, and to all of Julia's friends, family and colleagues. Julia passed away last month after a 5-year battle with breast cancer. She faced that battle with great courage, and in her final days she was surrounded by the people who loved her most. Julia was raised in Newcastle by a family renowned for their commitment to service. It was no surprise that Julia would ultimately find her way to Canberra to pursue a career in the parliamentary service. For more than 30 years, Julia dedicated herself to serving others, and in particular, the Australian Parliament. Through her work with the Department of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and with Hansard. Many members in this place will have known Julia through her work with our committees. Others may have sought her advice as a clerk at the table when in the chamber. Across each of these roles, Julia worked diligently to ensure the proper functioning of our democracy, serving the nation with integrity, accuracy and respect. Julia applied these same skills and expertise to her work strengthening parliamentary institutions in the Pacific, and I know that was work that she deeply loved, especially through her work with the Regional Assistant Mission to the Solomon Islands. Importantly, Julia's contribution to the Australian Parliament is measured not just in years, but also in the care, the energy and generosity that she brought to the workplace. Colleagues fondly remember Julia's vibrant personality, her loyalty, and the lasting impression she left on those fortunate enough to work alongside her. On behalf of members and staff who were privileged to work alongside Julia, I want to put on record our sincere gratitude for her remarkable service spanning more than 3 decades. Julia will be greatly missed by her friends and colleagues here in this Parliament, but also those in Newcastle who loved her dearly. Vale Julia Morris, may she rest in peace. And I would just acknowledge, I know that Julia had a very, private farewell here in Canberra, but her friends are gathering in Newcastle Friday week on the 10th of July to really come together, I think, to help celebrate her life, her early life that was well lived in Newcastle, and to surround her family there in Newcastle with all the love and support we can provide.
Thank you. In accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for members' constituency statements has concluded. I'll call the clerk.
Government business. Order of the day number 1, death of Professor Richard Scolyer, condolence motion, resumption of debate on the motion of the Prime Minister.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The member for Kooyong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to support this motion. For Professor Richard Scolyer, who died on the 7th of June, aged 59, 3 years after being diagnosed with a glioblastoma, which was, by any measure, one of the most consequential clinician scientists this country has produced. He was a friend. He was the very best of us. I'd like to read some words that his brother spoke at the funeral. Richard's brother Mark has been a dear friend of mine throughout my adult life, and it's a huge privilege to read what he said about his brother. Mark said, "I've been thinking about the essence of Rich, what he is to me. Richard, my brother, my blonde-haired brother, cheeky, annoying, funny, fun, showing off for the camera, spitting the dummy, being naughty, stuffing up, stubborn, determined, exploring, finding his own way to do things, like using the toilet facing backwards instead of facing to the front. Challenging. Challenging, succeeding, sometimes not succeeding, but always trying, having a crack. Our parents were always caring and supportive. Rich and I grew up learning to look after each other. We were shaped by challenges when we were young. We had to learn to look after Mum when she needed it. We were always surrounded by family and friends, too many to mention. We were lucky to grow up in Tasmania in the 60s and 70s, and we loved it. We had a great public education. We were fortunate to have people in our lives who gave us a sense of what was possible. Doctors, engineers, teachers and scientists. We learnt the importance and the wonder of learning and science. There was always plenty of sport. We participated in everything, but particularly footy. Rich and I grew up loving being part of teams and learning the value of teamwork. We had great family trips, holidays and celebrations with cousins, uncles and aunts, even a summer holiday visiting family in South Africa. We learnt a love of bushwalking and spent 8 summers camping at Ulverstone. In 2022, I walked with Rich into the walls of Jerusalem again, this time with our kids. It felt good escaping again, as brothers and dads with our kids in the Tassie bush. Cousins are so important growing up. They're special relationships, the glue that holds us together. For Emily, Matt and Lucy, Noah and Maya, Millie and Rory, I know you share these special relationships and I know that they'll continue. I know that Rich knew that too. Parkrun is something we'll all do together. It's really symbolic of Rich. We ran Parkrun the last 2 Saturdays. It'll always give me the feeling of Rich, but Rich was competitive too. He was always happy talking training, improving PBs, commenting on what you've been doing, talking about races and his training with his great mates. The Tour de Cure was such a special thing to do with Rich. Less than 2 weeks after I got my first bike, I spent a week cycling with him. The last 2 rides started at 5:30 in the morning at the Harbour Bridge for his favourite ride out to West Head. Selfless as ever, he had a banana and a squash peanut butter sandwich to share with me. It was a special week. We also pushed each other running 2 full-pace park runs. He told me it was the best week we'd ever had together. I said, "What about when we were kids?" He said, "I've got brain cancer, so this is the best week." It was a privilege just being his brother. Being able to drive Rich to treatment was special time together, chatting and reminiscing, having fun, even with both Rich and Anna backseat driving. I've met many of his long-time colleagues and collaborators, particularly his friend and mentor, John Thompson. I learnt from so many how respected and valued he was. People shared stories about how he went out of his way to help them, to create opportunities for them, and how much they appreciated it, how much they valued Rich as a colleague and a friend. He was in every way a great public servant and scientist, an example of why we should value science and public servants. He was a wonderful brother and a fantastic dad. Mark finishes. So what is the essence of Rich to me? I'll find it all around me, at parkrun, in the bush, riding solo, in family and in friendship. I'll keep asking myself, what would Rich do? His answer would be simple. Think of others, contribute, make a difference. The country is poorer for losing Rich Scolyer. He was the very best and brightest of us all. And I commend this motion to the House.
Thank you. The member for Bass.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Today I rise to honour Professor Richard Scolyer AO, a remarkable Australian and a deeply loved son of Tasmania. I didn't have the privilege of knowing Richard personally, but seeing how all of those who were able to interact with him throughout his life have reacted to his passing tells me that he was a truly great man. Many Australians knew Richard as one of the world's leading melanoma researchers. They knew him as the 2024 Joint Australian of the Year. They knew him as a cancer specialist who, when faced with his own devastating diagnosis, kept working, kept sharing, and kept trying to help others. But before all of that, Richard was one of ours. He was born in Launceston, he grew up in Riverside, he attended Riverside High School and went on to study medicine at the University of Tasmania. Even as his work took him to Sydney, to hospitals, laboratories and research institutions across the world, he remained proudly connected to our beautiful state, proudly connected to home. That connection was seen clearly at Bridgenorth Football Club, a club tied to his family for generations. Richard was their #1 ticket holder. He loved that club. He loved the community, and the community loved him back. Because for all of his brilliance, what so many people remember about Richard is not only what he achieved, but how he carried himself. Curious, brave, generous, and humble. We should all aim for such lofty heights as these. A person can change the world, but still belong to a place, a school, a club, a family, and to the people who knew them first. And Richard did change the world. Through his work with Professor Georgina Long and Melanoma Institute Australia, he helped to transform melanoma treatment. Advanced melanoma, once so often a death sentence, particularly in Tasmania where we have the highest rates across the country, it became survivable for many more people because of the work and the science that he helped to lead. Then, in 2023, when Richard was diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive and incurable brain cancer, but in the face of that, he did something extraordinary that I don't think many people could. He became a patient, but he did not stop being a scientist. He became the world's first brain cancer patient to have pre-surgery combination immunotherapy, an experimental treatment based on the breakthroughs that he had helped to pioneer himself in melanoma. And he shared that journey with honesty and generosity, not because that made it easier, and not because it would take away the fear, but because he knew that what he learnt from his treatment might help the next patient, the next family, hopefully even the next breakthrough. And that is courage, and that is service, and that is love in action. Our thoughts, all of Tasmania's thoughts, are with Richard's wife, Dr. Katie Nicol, his children, Emily, Matthew and Lucy, who were here yesterday in Parliament, his parents, Jenny and Morris, his brother Mark, his colleagues and everyone in Northern Tasmania who had the privilege to know him not as just a national figure, but simply as Richard. We're really proud that one of our own has managed to change the world, and may we honour him by continuing to back science, support medical research, care for each other, and as Richard would say, always giving it a crack. Thank you. I commend this motion to the House.
Thank you. The member for Chifley.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. As a nation, we are often engaged in an examination of who we are as Australians. We're going through another episode right now. I think there are a lot of elements of what it means to be Australian that at these points in time we reflect on. When I think about this question, I think quite often about the respect I have for our forebears, from First Nation to First Fleet. And the fact that when many of us take a moment to think about what Australians, what our forebears had to do in this nation with the climate, the environment that was there, and to be able to survive when the odds were against them, is something that should generate profound respect for a number of things, not just our toughness, not just about the fact that in so many cases Australian character is defined by a very heavy physical element of being able to survive the elements themselves. But one of the big things that's helped this nation survive is our know-how and smarts. And our know-how and smarts is not just something that people think, I do not possess that is for someone who is much better than me. Australians have a view that whatever walk of life, we've been able to make it in this country by thinking deeply about what it takes to survive. And again, I say that from the First Nations to the First Fleet and beyond, we have had the odds against us. We've had poets write about a sunburnt country, and the tragedy of that poem has befallen generations from then to now because of the fact that we enjoy being in the sun so much. It's actually, in many respects, that enjoyment we've paid for, and in many cases we've paid for it with our lives, with the cancers that have emerged, particularly in terms of melanoma. And I think about the contributions of the member for Bass and the member for Kooyong here today, and others who've spoken in the condolence about Professor Richard Scolyer, and the fact that he threw himself into trying to ease the burden, the dread that comes from a diagnosis that you are facing one of your most difficult challenges in life, and he had spent the bulk of his time thinking about how we could beat melanoma and how we could free people from that death sentence, because more often than not, that is exactly what it amounts to. And a lot has been spoken about what Richard Scolyer has done in terms of his professional, his scientific, his research background. But I come back, if I may, to the remarks I just reflected on earlier. When we think of the Australian character, we think of the attribution of the physical and our ability to overcome with the physical attribute. And we also think, obviously, of our sporting prowess, and we've got a lot to be proud of there. But I think of the point that most people who've achieved an Order of Australia in this nation have come from a science and research background. We rightly spare the accolades for what occurs on the sporting field, but it's not just the physical that has led to heroism. It has also been the fact that we've had Australians who've dedicated their smarts and their know-how to help their fellow Australians. When I took the moment to issue my condolences to Richard's wife, Katie, yesterday, and Katie and Emily, Matt and Lucy were on the floor with us all yesterday, I'd expressed the view to Katie that her husband was a national hero. National heroes don't always attain that title of heroism because they've been successful, but it has been the journey and the struggle that they have undertaken that marks them out. And in the case of Richard Scolyer, he became, as the member for Bass observed, as others observed, his own patient. When he had that seizure 2 years ago and he knew what was going to befall him, he threw himself in. As he said, he did not want to die. He wanted to live, as has been remarked previously. But he threw everything that he could, including his own body, to not just save himself but save others. And it's been that sacrifice that he made, combined with the fact that it was observed that so much of what he did
there was an absence of gravitas and ego. Richard was us. He walked amongst us all, containing that special talent and gift that he had, and with that desire to save others, that I think marks him out. And he was not successful in that journey that he wanted so much, so desperately to be successful of. But the fact that what he did and how he did it should mark him out as a national hero. And so my words to his wife, to his widow, I gave from the bottom of my heart, because this bloke was a national hero. And I think that it's right that we recognise that in this chamber, devoid of politics, devoid of division, united in the respect we have for a fellow Australian in what they're prepared to do for others. And Richard Scolyer did that in spades. And I think in that letter too that he wrote, I don't think any of us would not have been touched by that final letter that he penned, knowing how hard it would have been to write those words, every single letter in those words, every apostrophe, every full stop, and particularly the full stop. But when he said we should dedicate ourselves in particular to doing whatever we can to back science and research, he wasn't just saying that from a simple mechanistic point of view. He was speaking to the Australian character, of which know-how is such a big part, and that we can get it done, because it's not just about the know-how, it's about having faith in who we are. We are often the underdog, we are often underestimated, but we often achieve, and he wants to see more of that. And if we honour this bloke, if we honour this national hero in any way, if we are serious to honour in faithful regard to what he has done, we pick up that challenge he said, which is to invest in science, in research, but also to invest in who we are as a country, who we are as a people, and what we can do for the rest of the world. And I just want to honour Richard Scolyer for what he did. I am but one voice, but I just want, like many other voices in this country that wanted to honour him, just in awe, respect, and committed to fulfilling what he has asked us to pick up from where he's left off and to deliver for others. Richard Scolyer was a national hero. Vale.
Thank you. The member for Riverina.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Beautiful, powerful words from the member for Chifley. Heartfelt, and we all share his raw emotion. I can tell by looking at him that he is very touched, as we all are, and all will go on being, by Richard Scolyer's life. Australia has lost two giants in recent weeks. Neil Danaher, AO, Richard Scolyer, AO. Both should be posthumously awarded ACs, because they are the best of the best. Two, in their own words, ordinary men, but two who've done extraordinary things for Australia, and particularly fighting insidious diseases. And we as members of Parliament should do, and I think do everything we can to increase funding for diseases which beset our nation. But these two men have done so much to raise awareness and the stakes in making sure that we, in Neil Danaher's case, fight motor neurone disease. And I'll speak more about Richard Scolyer and his battles against melanoma and other cancers in this contribution. But we can ill afford to lose two men of their ilk and of their calibre and of their credentials at such a young age. And Richard Scolyer was 59, Neil Danaher was 65. They probably lived a lot longer than some of the sufferers of the diseases which took both of those fine gentlemen. But they still went way too soon. They were still way too young, and they still had so much more to give. But their memory and their legacy will live on, thanks to their courage, thanks to the unique way that they both campaigned and advocated for and on behalf of the communities of people who are bedevilled by such by suffering from MND and from melanoma. And the member for Chifley mentioned about sunburnt country, and yes, we are. And I'm so very pleased that Annette St Clair, a wonderful human being from Wagga Wagga, has been asked to attend the state funeral service for Richard at the Sydney Opera House on 13 July. And she's quite moved by that invitation. Now, Richard Scolyer and Annette St Clair met about 8 years ago through Melanoma Institute Australia, before Professor Scolyer came to Wagga Wagga just 2 years ago as a guest speaker at the annual Amy St Clair Melanoma Ball, held in honour of Annette and Peter's beautiful daughter, Amy, who died of melanoma in 2009, taken way too soon, way too soon. Now, the world-renowned pathologist and 2024 Australian of the Year, of course, he passed away on June 7. Now, Annette said it was inspiring to hear his story throughout his journey, and she told the local newspaper, the Daily Advertiser, this. He shared his personal story, and he was just such a brave, compassionate man, and we heard that from the member for Chifley a moment ago. He was the most warm, caring, generous man. On Saturday, about lunchtime, I received an invitation that has come from his wife, Katie, and his family to invite us, which was lovely. My husband and I feel very humbled to be invited to his state funeral. Annette and the Wagga Wagga community, indeed the nation, have been so touched and are mourning Richard's loss. No one is mourning it more than his wife and children. They shouldn't have lost their dad. I mean, he's fought the good fight. He's finished the race. He's kept the faith to make sure that people know about this disease and other cancers, and to do something about it. And my thoughts and love and condolences go out to Katie and his children, Emily, Matthew and Lucy. And it is a profound loss that they have suffered. I listened closely to the words of the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition and the Health Minister yesterday before question time. And I think everybody shared their deep and meaningful words about what a loss this nation has suffered. Because as the member for Chifley has just pointed out, that letter that Richard Scolyer wrote just prior to his death should be required reading in our schools. And it shared the journey, the emotion, but almost you could almost argue the Australian larrikin spirit of this bloke. And I'll call him a bloke because you know, he was just one of us. But then again, he was someone so much more special than most of us, because he knew what lay ahead. He knew that he was going to succumb to the diseases that were afflicting his body, and yet he used his final months and weeks and days and hours to send a message to the nation about what can be done, what should be done, how we should act. And, you know, that's extraordinary. That is extraordinary when, as the Prime Minister said, and the member for Hume did too, most people would use those moments to probably shrink away from society, to spend them with family and perhaps, and I would say this, even feeling sorry for themselves, but not Richard Scolyer, not this man, not this bloke. Wow, what an amazing human being he was and he is, quite frankly, and I use the present tense there because he will continue to be a name that will resonate throughout this nation. He will be a name that whenever melanoma is discussed, whenever funding is required, whenever awareness needs to be raised, the name Richard Scolyer will live on, valet to a brave and warm an amazing Australian.
Thank you. I understand it is the wish of honourable members to signify at this stage their respect and sympathy by rising in their places, and I ask all present to do so. I thank the Federation Chamber.
Leave the Federation Chambers move that further proceedings be conducted in the House.
Is leave granted?
I move that further proceedings be conducted in the House.
The question is that further proceedings be conducted in the House. All of those of that opinion say aye. Against no. The ayes have it.
I move the Federation Chamber do now adjourn.
Is there a seconder?
Second motion.
The member for Mayo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, 10 years ago today, the community of Mayo put their trust in me to represent them. And I'd particularly like to acknowledge the former Senator Nick Xenophon. Nick Xenophon put his trust in me to represent his party. Now, Nick only stayed in the Parliament for a year after I was elected, but I greatly enjoyed that time I had with Nick Xenophon, and also Sterling Griff, a former Senator as well. As a community, though, when I look at Mayo, we've achieved so much together. If I think of the funding that we've been able to get into our community, whether that be South Road, going upgrades from Aldinga to Selix, Victor Harbour Road, Long Valley Road, Strathalbyn, the freeway, both the upgrades that are happening now and the new interchanges that are happening at Harndorf and Mount Barker. Now, of course, we've had such enormous population growth, there is so much more to do, and I mustn't forget Kangaroo Island and upgrades to Hog Bay Road, which have improved safety. But there's always so much to do, Deputy Speaker. When I look at health, we have emergency departments that have been upgraded at Victor Harbour and a new emergency department in Mount Barker. It's hard to believe when I started as a member 10 years ago, we didn't even have an emergency department in Mount Barker for such a big population. So there's been so much that's happened across our community, some big, some small, whether it's the Summit Sports Complex or Mount Lofty Football Club, or Houghton and their sporting clubs and footy club, or the Gumaraka Tennis Courts, or indeed the Aldinga Soccer Club. These have all been incredibly worthwhile and important projects that our whole community has backed in together. And one that we've all really loved and enjoyed being on is the Amy Gillett Bikeway, and that's now been extended from Mount Torrens to Burwood. Sometimes these things seem like an overnight success, but they take many, many years to come together. There's always more to do, and every time I cross something off the list, I know that there's more that our community wants to add on to the list, and that's how it should be. And we've gone through so much together. In my community, in 2019, the summer, going into 2020, we had bushfires across the Adelaide Hills and in Kangaroo Island. It broke our hearts. It's left scars on our hearts. But we came together because that's what we do in Mayo. People often say to me, what's the greatest thing that you love about your job? And I would say it's actually never in the media what I love the most. What I love the most is when I can help somebody, when my team can help somebody with their aged care issue or their NDIS package or a Centrelink problem. When people visit their federal member, often in their darkest hour, and if you can help them, I think that that is the greatest joy of what we do. Never makes the media, and nor should it. But that, when you get a hug in a supermarket from someone who says, thank you so much for helping my family, that to me is the greatest joy. I'd like to acknowledge my team because another Member of Parliament once said that we're all like swans or ducks just sort of gliding across the pond, but it's those legs underneath us that are moving incredibly fast that are making it happen. And for all of us, and certainly for me, that is my team members. And some of them have been with me for many, many, many years. and whether they've been with me for a short time or a long time, I've got to say every single member of my team has been fantastic. They really have. I love the team of people I work with. It makes me smile. I'm just turning up every day. I'd also like to acknowledge 3 members of my team who have passed. We lost Dale, we lost Taylor, and we lost Melanie to breast cancer. And that's been incredibly hard for us as a community, for us as a team in my office, but a great privilege to know and to work with those 3 wonderful individuals. In closing, Deputy Speaker, I should thank my family. My children were quite young. My daughter was just 11. She turned 21. My 2 boys were teenagers. They're now getting married. And my beautiful husband, Nathan, who has stood by me for these last 10 years. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. The member for Spence.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the member for Mayor for that fine contribution to this House just now. Before I entered this place, I spent a decade working offshore in the Australian oil and gas industry. From 2006 until 2016, I worked as a naval seaman and bosun, serving aboard drill rigs, seismic survey vessels, anchor handlers and a range of offshore support vessels. Those years taught me plenty about hard work. They also taught me something far more important. No matter where a seafarer comes from, everyone deserves to be treated with respect, paid fairly and return home safely. Life at sea is unlike any other profession. The hours are long, the conditions are unforgiving, and you're no less than hundreds of kilometres from your family. During that time, I also served as a union delegate. This was about making sure those without a voice had someone prepared to stand up for them. That experience has stayed with me ever since. Perhaps that is why I reacted so strongly after meeting 2 former Carnival Cruise employees, Queen and Christiana, this week. What they described left me entirely appalled. These were not isolated complaints about difficult work. They were accounts of systemic exploitation taking place aboard vessels carrying Australian passengers and operating from Australian ports. This is a workplace where retail crew members earn around $225 each week. Spread across the hours they were expected to work, that amounted to little more than $2 an hour. No Australian should consider that acceptable for themselves. Neither should we accept that for anyone else. Queen and Christiana described having to purchase their own drinking water, Wi-Fi, toiletries and sanitary products while living on board. Basic necessities became another cost deducted from wages that were already impossible to live on. No employer should expect workers to pay simply to meet their most fundamental needs. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. Meals served to crew were recycled from food left over in the guest dining areas. Workers suffering illness, including gastro, had to continue performing their duties because taking time off simply was not an option. Instead of receiving rest, they'd have their shore leave cancelled altogether. That should concern every Australian. Ships are demanding workplaces where the spread of illness places everybody on board at risk. Long shifts are routine, often stretching well beyond 12-hour days. Nobody should have to choose between protecting their health and keeping their job. And after hearing this, nobody can convince me to go on a Carnival cruise in the future. The Maritime Union of Australia deserves enormous credit for exposing these practices. For years, they have fought to ensure vulnerable international seafarers receive the same dignity and respect every worker deserves. Without that advocacy, many of those stories would never have reached the Australian public or light of day. Queen captured this issue perfectly when she said, "Carnival needs to be held accountable for how they treat the crew members. It's nothing short of slavery." She also reminded Australians that every cruise purchased allows these practices to continue. Christiana also said, "We need Carnival to stop exploiting the workers. We work very long hours and get paid not even peanuts." Australia has built its reputation on fair wages, safe workplaces and respect for working people. Those values cannot stop at the water's edge. A multinational company should never gain a commercial advantage by exploiting vulnerable workers who have little ability to defend themselves. Crew aboard Carnival's 3 Australian home-ported vessels have signed a petition calling on the company to commence collective bargaining and begin addressing these unacceptable conditions. That is not a radical demand. It is a right protected under international maritime law. This week, those crew members presented their petition to the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, the agency responsible for enforcing seafarer rights. I call on AMSA to ensure these rights are respected and enforced. I know the pride that comes from working in the maritime sector. I also know the sacrifices made by those who spend months away from their families to keep the global trade and tourism moving. That commitment should never be rewarded with exploitation. Australia can do better than this, and we expect better than this. Carnival Cruises, I suggest that you start doing better immediately. Thank you.
I thank the member and I call the member for Nichols.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As I've said often in this place, it's a great privilege to represent the electorate of Nichols in northern Victoria, one of the great food-producing parts of Australia. And recently I had the great honour to go to a place called Legacy Packing in Cobram for the official relaunch of their state-of-the-art packing facility. And the business has invested $30 million in new AI grading technology delivered in partnership with the company Tomra. It's the largest investment of its kind in the Asia-Pacific region, and it will increase packing facility fivefold. And it's a major vote of confidence in Cobram, which is where the facility is, in the Goulburn Valley more generally, but also in the citrus industry. So this area grows a lot of oranges, lemons, oranges and lemons mainly, and now these things will be packed here and sent both around Australia and for export. It's strengthening one of Australia's key export regions. Not only is fruit exported from this part of the world, but dairy products. And it gives the local growers in the technology to meet the growing demand, and there is demand for wonderful Australian produce. Much of the construction and installation was also carried out by local contractors and tradespeople, supporting jobs throughout the region. And Legacy Packing will supply this fruit to supermarkets and wholesale markets across Australia and also to China, the USA, Singapore and the UAE. Now, investments like this help Australian citrus remain competitive in global markets, and regional communities share those successes. We've also got high-tech investment in the dairy industry and the apple and pear industry, and of course some new investments in the processing facility SPC, which is an iconic brand in Australia and processes peaches, pears, apples and also processing tomatoes. But I do worry, Deputy Speaker, about the future of these industries and the future of investment, because government policies around irrigation water to do with the Murray-Darling Basin plan, the additions to the Murray-Darling Basin plan, which were incredibly regrettable, which passed this parliament in the last parliament, changes which are making energy more expensive and the government not facilitating particularly the gas industry, which this fruit processing relies on, business confidence and taxes are all threatening these future investments. Now, a major agribusiness operator in northern Victoria who operates very successfully has told me no more investment in Australia, the government's making it too hard. My investment from now on is going to be over in California. That hurts me to hear that, because that's a lot of jobs and investment that we don't even know we're missing out on, and we're not seeing. And in addition, just in relation to the state of Victoria, there's a national company that's looking to put its new facility somewhere in Australia, and that facility is going to give a lot of jobs and a lot of economic activity wherever it goes. And I'm not going to mention what that facility is or what that company is, because it was told to me in confidence. They've said they take Victoria off the list straight away. They will put it maybe in New South Wales, maybe in Western Australia, maybe in Queensland, but don't even consider Victoria. The taxes, the government interference, now this proposed work from home legislation, it just means that Victoria is not an option. And as a Victorian, as a person who loves the people I represent and wants to see them do well, it's really regrettable that a company would have that attitude. But sadly, I think that's as a result of the way the Victorian government has conducted itself. And I worry that the way the federal government is conducting itself in such an anti-business way, we're going to see global companies cross Australia off the list when they're looking for their investment. So we talk a lot about workers and rights, as we should, but we've got to have private industry in this country if we're going to have the jobs. So I urge the government to look at these things that they've done, look at this legislation around irrigation water, energy policy, taxes, business confidence, and make sure that when people are considering where they're going to invest, particularly in agribusiness, but in all sorts of manufacturing, that they're not crossing Australia off the list because of bad government policy. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member and I call the member for Maribyrnong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Before I came into this place, I spent about just over 5 years as the CEO of the Parenthood, Australia's peak advocacy body for parents and carers. Our work focused on how do we make Australia the best place in the world to be a parent. So I spent many hours in this building helping amplify the voices of parents and the needs that they had. And when we talk about need, often this is expressed quite acutely in those first few weeks and months of being a new parent. I think in particular about the new mums that I met at my time at the Parenthood. Their stories were different, but often what they wanted most was the same, and that was time. To be able to afford just a few more months or weeks with their newborn baby. Deputy Speaker, Labor built this country's first national paid parental leave scheme. When it began in 2011, it gave families 18 weeks, and I watched it change households. I also watched how quickly it could be put at risk. In 2015, parents who used the scheme exactly as it was designed got branded double dippers by those opposite, as if caring for a newborn were a rort. To add insult to injury, the then Treasurer announced these plans to end so-called double dipping on Mother's Day, of all days. My job that year was defending the mums and dads whose only offence was wanting to spend more time with their newborn by utilising the scheme as intended. But the parents of Australia were not deterred by these attacks. They kept asking, calmly, stubbornly, in their tens of thousands, and the country moved with them. Unions, employers, and finally this Parliament. And yesterday, that ask was again answered in another large step forward, the biggest expansion of paid parental leave since Labor created the scheme. This week, Deputy Speaker, paid parental leave in Australia is now a full 6 months, 26 weeks, paid at a higher rate at just over $1,000 a week, with income limits lifted so more families qualify. And because we started paying superannuation on parental leave last year, taking those months with your baby no longer leaves a hole in your retirement savings. We delivered this because women should not retire poorer for having raised this country's children. And, Deputy Speaker, the economic case for this reform is rock solid. Parents keep connected to work and careers no longer stall the first birthday. But in the 5 years of advocacy, not one mum ever told me she wanted to leave just for some time off. She wanted it because you only get this chance with your newborn once, and it goes so quickly. Deputy Speaker, our government's sole focus is on delivering real change for working people and their families. That is why yesterday every Australian taxpayer received another tax cut. 13 million people keeping more of what they earn. And around 3 million workers on minimum award wages got a pay rise. And among them are early childhood educators, those who I stood alongside in the Big Steps campaign, and those I've met locally, like Vashinka at Good Start in Flemington, doing some of the most important work in this country. Our government has banned supermarket price gouging. It's now law with some serious penalties behind it. So working families doing the weekly shop get a fair deal. And superannuation now lands with every payday instead of months behind, which protects workers least able to absorb being shortchanged. Every one of those changes helps on its own, but arriving all at once, they take the real pressure off working families. That is real change delivered. Deputy Speaker, I want to finish with the people who made this happen. To the parents of my community, the ones I've met out at local sporting fields and on the doors. You kept asking, and our government is listening. Change like this doesn't happen on its own. It happens when ordinary people organise. And to everyone expecting a baby this year, congratulations. You will be among the first families in Australia to take the opportunity to have a full 6 months off. I hope you enjoy every single day. Deputy Speaker, we know the job is not finished. There is always more work to do to support working families, and that's exactly what we focus on every day we're in this place and out in our communities. Thanks very much.
I thank the member and I call the Shadow Minister for Families and Social Services and the member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The working homeless is one of our country's most worrying trends. When a working mother escapes violence only to trade fear inside her home for fear inside a parked car with her children, we should all be asking, how has Australia come to this? Every woman sleeping in a car after finishing a day's work is a stain on our national conscience. The new face of homelessness is increasingly not someone disconnected from the workplace. It is someone who gets up every morning, goes to work, pays tax, contributes to their community and does everything we tell Australians they should do to get ahead. The new face of homelessness is the working homeless. And nowhere is this crisis more visible than among women escaping violence, both across the country and within my own electorate of Lindsay. It cuts me to the core to hear the Penrith Women's Health Centre say that around 10% of their clients are now working homeless. These are women fleeing violence, often with little more than the clothes on their backs. Last year alone, the centre supported 750 women escaping violence in their homes. They told me homelessness is increasingly a direct consequence of domestic and family violence. They're also seeing more older women seeking help, women with little superannuation, women experiencing elder abuse, and women who are still working. The centre put it plainly, when and where are you going to find an extra $1,000 for a bond? They told me they have women living in cars while waiting for transitional accommodation, women that are working jobs, women trying to keep their children safe and women doing everything right, yet unable to secure a rental property because the market is simply too tight. 7 in 10 women escaping violence leave behind their home and assets, often stepping directly into homelessness. Escaping a violent relationship typically costs $18,000 and takes 141 hours, an impossible barrier for many women. The housing crisis is making an already desperate situation worse. National rental vacancy rates remain at just 1.2%. In New South Wales, the number of people sleeping rough has climbed to 2,308 people, a 75% increase since 2020. And that should shame this government. In my own electorate of Lindsay, the number of people sleeping rough in the Penrith local government area has increased by over 30% in just 1 year. And for every person counted sleeping rough, there are many more living in cars, couch surfing or remaining in unsafe situations because they simply have nowhere else to go. At the same time, cost of living pressures continue to crush household budgets. The latest Foodbank Hunger Report found that 3.5 million Australian households either ran out of food or were forced to reduce the quality of their meals over the past year. And most disturbing of all, 64% of those experiencing food insecurity are actually employed. And let that sink in. The majority of Australians struggling to put food on the table are working. OzHarvest's latest frontline report reveals more than 350,000 people are seeking food relief every month, while more than 74,000 are being turned away because services cannot keep up with demand. As OzHarvest founder Ronnie Khan so powerfully said, the cost of living crisis has become a cost of surviving crisis. Yet despite seeing Australians pushed to the brink, this government's budget does nothing. It delivers nothing for food relief organisations that are struggling under unprecedented pressure. Families in Lindsay tell me they're hanging on by their fingertips. They worry about higher rents, higher bills and whether they can absorb one more unexpected expense. The warning lights are flashing across the economy. More than 4 million Australians live in poverty, rents have soared, childcare costs continue to rise and home ownership is slipping further out of reach. Mortgage arrears have risen by 6.8% over the past year, while credit card arrears among Gen Z have surged by almost 29%. Hard work should lead to security, yet more than 1 in every 100 Australians sought homelessness assistance last year. Compassion begins with seeing this reality clearly and choosing to act. More than 20 years of work has gone into Christ Mission Possible's efforts for the local community. They're providing more than 60,000 nights of shelter across Greater Sydney, including my community. And those beds represent more than accommodation. They represent safety, dignity and hope. In Australia, a job should be a pathway out of hardship, not a front row seat to it. Hard work should deliver security, dignity and opportunity. That is the Australian promise. Everyone should afford a safe place to call home, and we cannot say that promise is being kept.
I thank the member and I call the Minister for Social Security and the member for Sydney.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. The federal government is gravely concerned about the Christian Brothers Oceania Province's 22nd of June 2026 announcement that it would seek creditor and court approval for a creditor's scheme of arrangement and a moratorium on all current and future civil proceedings in connection with child sexual abuse claims. This is causing great distress across the community of survivors of child sexual abuse. The Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse caused hundreds of institutions, including the Catholic Church, to confront their shocking history of abuse. The misconduct and tactics that were used by institutions to avoid liability were laid bare. Among the Royal Commission's 409 recommendations was the establishment of the National Redress Scheme. The Redress Scheme has since 2018 received 80,000 applications and disbursed over $2 billion in redress payments to survivors. Thousands have received apologies or counselling that has changed their lives. That acknowledgement has changed their lives. There are several hundred pending claims against the Christian Brothers in the redress scheme, and I expect there may be more before lodgement dates close for applications. The Christian Brothers' application to the New South Wales Supreme Court has injected even greater uncertainty into the lives of survivors, already forever altered by the conduct of members of the Order. This situation has been brought about by the Christian Brothers' view that it is confronting financial challenges and that these challenges will impact the Order's capacity to meet future compensation payments. I want to take the opportunity to note recent media reports, particularly those in the Australian Financial Review, that, and I quote, Edmund Rice Education was created in 2007 and now operates dozens of schools affiliated with the Christian Brothers. The split created a new organisation with the bulk of the Christian Brothers' assets. Edmund Rice Education had more than $345 million in cash in its account at the end of December 2024. In total, land deemed by Edmund Rice Education to be worth $891 million was transferred to it by the Christian Brothers between 2013 and 2017. The land has not been revalued in the accounts since its transfer, notes proxy advisor Dean Patch. Assuming a moderate 7% rate of price growth, he estimates the present value of the transferred land at some $2 billion. I end the quote there. You know, Madam Deputy Speaker, growing up, I was taught that there was one church and one God, not multiple corporate entities that transfer assets for purposes that are yet to be made clear. It is, of course, entirely up to the court to interpret the legal validity of the application made by the Christian Brothers. I speak on behalf of the federal government, in particular for the redress scheme, which I have responsibility to administer, but most importantly for victims and survivors of child sexual abuse. The impact on victim survivors of this application is manifold. They ask again, who can they trust? Of course, such an arrangement will have financial impacts on victim survivors. The scheme's operating expenses are met by taxpayers, who also step in as a funder of last resort for compensation payments. So the financial impacts obviously go beyond the victim survivors themselves. Taxpayers should not have to step in to compensate victims of crime when the institution responsible is readily identifiable and has substantial wealth. But the feeling that no one may be held to account for this abuse, that is perhaps even worse than the financial impacts that we're having. The idea that no one will be held to account for child sexual abuse when it's identifiable where it happened and who was responsible, I think is devastating for victims and survivors. I was very pleased, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker, to see the President of the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, Archbishop Timothy Costello, quoted in the Financial Review on the 23rd of June. He said that the abuse occurred in institutions now operated by Edmund Rice Education Australia, an organisation that was split out of the Christian Brothers. He said of that, and I quote him now, "It is the great hope of the conference that the Christian Brothers find a way to support the provision of care for victims of abuse that occurred in institutions conducted by the Christian Brothers." And that's the end of the quote. My department, the Department of Social Services, filed submissions in the New South Wales Supreme Court on the 30th of June 2026. The department and the government were represented at a hearing held this morning, 2nd of July. We will remain engaged as the matter works its way through the court. I know that no compensation can undo the harm and the hurt that so many victims and survivors of child sexual abuse experienced, but that compensation is the absolute minimum that they should be able to expect, and that is owed to them.
Thank you. The question that the chamber do now adjourn and the motion be agreed to, all of those of that opinion say aye. The contrary? No, I think the ayes have it. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 12:30, Tuesday the 11th of August 2026.